Now we're ready to fill in the body of the function. The next instruction is the function is to open the file to read the data. If the file does not open, return the string unable to open file. And I'm going to copy this because we'll want it to match exactly what this is. So it passes all of our testing. So we're going to open the file for input. And remember, when we open for input, we want to make sure to test that open worked. Okay, and that's just part of doing an input file stream. So for input, we use ifstream is the type of object that we use. Now, for this to work, we're going to want to make sure that we include the header file for fstream. And that's the header file that defines ifstreams. Now we can give it a name with this variable or object. We can give it whatever name we want. I'm going to call it in. And then we need to tell it what file to open. And notice that the file name was sent to us as a parameter. So there's the file name that is the parameter, that is the string to open. Right, that's that file name there. So that's ready. So now we've opened it. Now we want to test it. And if in failed, so we just ask the method fail. If it failed, then we want to return that string in the instructions. So we simply return unable to open file. Now we're at a point that we can test what we've done. So the idea is you want to be testing this really often, right? To make sure your code is running, everything's compiling, it's doing what you expect. And this is the first time we've got to something where we're actually doing that we can test. So let's move to our main.cpp file, and that's where we will test it. So notice it's going to take some setup to be able to test it because this actual function requires a string and 4 arrays and an integer. So we have to set all of those up before we can get started. So we want to define the arrays, right? So this is an array. And since we're going to be using arrays, we want to go up and pound include it. The array. Here we go. So we'll include that header file. We're going to want to pound include the functions.h header file. Notice the difference between these. The ones that we create are in quotes. The ones that come automatically in libraries are with the less than, greater than signs. So those are a little bit different. Okay. So we wanted to define these arrays. So array. Now this first one is of type double. And how big is it? It's k max size. Now remember we defined that in functions.h, but it's available to us because we pound included and it was globally defined, right? So it's a constant. We can make that available broadly. So this is our first one, and this one contains hours. The next one is a character, and it is the pay rate. Not pay rate, the pay type, so it's a single character. It's the same size, so it's k max size, and we can simply call this pay type. The next one is also a double, and this is pay rate. It's still k max size, we can put that size, and this is pay rate. And then the last array that we need is contains strings, also of k max size. And it's the names. All right, there we have it. Now we've started using strings, so we want to go up and make sure we include string. Now it's good practice, even though these may have been defined in the functions.h file. It's a good idea for its regular programming practice to make sure that the CPP file is stands alone, so it contains all of the header files that it needs. And we know they won't be doubly entered because they will be protected. All right, so we've been able to define the arrays to hold the data. To read the data from the file, we still need a couple of things. We still need the file name. So we need a string that's going to be the file name. Notice that I've used exactly the same names as we used in the prototype and in the function header, and they don't have to match, but they can. It makes it very clear if they are, but it's up to you. We can keep them the same or not. So the file name, and here what we can test is whether that it's valid or not. So let's go ahead and we're going to have to go up one directory, and then let's just call it not found. So we don't have one called that. So we'll just send that file name, and we know it won't be found. And that's what we can test to see if it returns the value that we expect it to return. So we've got the string. The other thing we need is the size. And this is where is the next element to be added in the array. And in this case, we're starting right at the beginning, so we want to start it at 0. Now we have everything we need to call the function. Oh, one more thing. It's going to return a message to us, and we want to make sure we have that. So let's go ahead and do a string that will catch the message. Okay, now we can call it. So message equals, and it's read data from file. And we need to send it all this information, right? We need to send it the file name. We need to send it hours. We want to make sure these are in the right order because it'll make a big difference. Pay type, then pay rate. Notice how the editor's helping us figure out what we need next. And then the names. And then finally the size. And those are all the things that we need. So we save that. And now we're finally at a point where we can test and see if the message is what we want. So let's see out the message. All right, so we've printed that out. Now we get to go get our compiler up and working. So the very first time we do it, we need to make a directory for build. Notice that we're doing a lot of setup. And that's really the case. Once we get going, we're going to be, it'll go faster, right? But right now, each step, we're having to set up a new file, or in this case, set up a new folder. So we set up the build. Okay, we need to make the files. This takes longer the first time around. And then we need to build the files. Oh, and we've made a mistake. So let's go ahead and figure out what our error is. So it says our error is in the read data from file. Warning, control reaches end of non-void function. Oh, so we don't have it quite set up yet. So notice that we did return it at this point, but there's a chance it won't go in the if statement. So we need to make sure we're returning something here. So let's just go ahead and return an empty string at this point. Okay, so we'll just say that, and that is a string, so it matches the function definition. Okay, now we've got that set up. Let's go ahead and build it again. And then we can run it. And then we look for ca.exe if you're on Windows, and just ca if you're on Linux. And what did it say? Message, unable to open file, which is exactly what we wanted to do it, except for the space. That's doing just what we want it to do. So we add a space. Now let's test it with the file we actually have. So we still need to go up a directory and do payroll underscore data. Save it and run it. Oh, look at that. I had the slash backwards. I don't know why it didn't complain at me before. Sometimes warnings show and sometimes they don't, and that's what that was. So let's go ahead and fix it and run it one more time. Build it. And run it. And notice we did not get that error message. So it returned the empty string just like we expected. There you go. We've tested what we've done so far.